We are in week 3 of forgiveness. Last week, we learned that literally anything can be forgiven. All one has to do is choose to forgive and then take the steps to allow that forgiveness to reach our heart. And yes, I realize that what I just said may be difficult for some people to believe, but stay with me. Forgiveness can be a tough emotional process, but let's walk through it together. We heard last week the incredible story of Eva Kaur, a survivor of the infamous Dr. Mengele's experiments on twins in Auschwitz, and she forgave him. She forgave all of the people whose choices and actions negatively impacted her life, both during the war and at other times in her life. And she did it by writing over 500 letters of forgiveness. And as we saw in the example of her letter to her father, while she did acknowledge all of the ways she was hurt, she also found a way to note how that hurt shaped her life for the better. So we took a cue from her and we decided to start writing letters of forgiveness of our own for the pain that we've been carrying around. And we went a step further by making the choice to send those letters out, not to the people or the events that caused this burden that we're holding, but out into the universe. Okay, we're doing that by either putting them in an envelope and dropping it off at the post office, mailbox. You got to put it through the slot because the mailman who usually brings your mail is not going to take an envelope with no stamp and no address. They just won't do it. But the post office box cannot spit it out. So go put it in there, or you can bring it in here and we can burn them in our burning bowl. And if you remind me quickly, I will get the burning bowl out after the service if anybody's got anything that they want to put in there. If I don't do it, grab me. I'll make it happen. Now, some of you who are unfamiliar with the burning bowl, you may wonder why we would burn the letters or make that extra bit of effort to take them to the post office. It's symbolic and it's really powerful, right? We seek to unburden ourselves of the weight of unforgiveness, right? So the first step is to work it out in our minds. The next step is to literally let it go. By pouring our feelings out, we cleanse our heart of the painful memories. But if we hold on to everything that we just poured out, we're not really letting go of it, are we? Think of it as a stack of books. We all have these books that we've been carrying around, right? Some of them are thick, weighty volumes that feel impossibly heavy, and others are just a few pages. But every one of those books is filled with something that we haven't been able to let go of. And so we look at that huge stack of books in our hands and we feel how difficult it is to really live life when we're trying to hold on to them. And so we decide to finally choose a few that we've already read far too many times and put them down. But instead of putting them down and getting rid of the burden of carrying them, we decide to hold on to them just in case. So we put them in a backpack and we carry them an entirely other way. Each letter is one of those books in your hands. Would you rather put the books down, forgive the debt that that book represents and be free of it, or shift the load so that you're still carrying the books in a different way? To free yourself of the weight, you have to put your book in the form of a letter down for good. If you hold on to your letters, you may go back and reread the stories. And if you do, you'll just be picking up that heavy, dusty, old burden again. And you don't want it back. So burn it or send it out. Do whatever you have to do to make sure that that book is permanently gone. Does that make sense? And somebody asked me, well, what if it doesn't feel done? You write it out again and you get it out again. And you keep repeating that until you feel like it's gone. But you don't reread it. Rewrite it, because you may find it cleanses a little bit each time, okay? Now, something that we really have to realize is that forgiveness, it isn't for the other person. It isn't for the event. It isn't for the circumstance. The person or event or circumstance likely doesn't care one whit how we feel or whether or not we've held on to emotions. Forgiveness is for you. It's your burden. And that burden stands in the way of your happiness, your growth, of your fulfillment, and of any other wonderful positive change in your life. And I brought this book up in several talks over the last few years, and it's A Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping. And he also has a website, radicalforgiveness.org. If you go log in there, he has all kinds of resources that you can print out for free. But if you do the forgiveness work in the way he outlines it, it always comes down to our own judgment. The choices we make and the actions we take as a result of that judgment. And again, that is a tough pill to swallow if you've been through something really rough. But he really helps us make sense of things. He describes his forgiveness formula in 5 stages. He says stage 1 is where you tell the story of what happened, why you feel victimized, who is to blame, and so on. And that's what we've been doing in our minds ever since it happened, right? Okay, stage 2 is to give yourself permission to feel that full range of feelings associated with that story, no matter what they are. Stage 3 asks you to step back and to try to understand the person's motives for doing what they did. Bring some empathy and compassion into the mix. Okay, I know that was a lot. Let me repeat that. Step back and try to understand. Not figure out, not seek motivation for. Try to understand. It's entirely different to look at someone, they did it because they don't like me and they wanted to be me. No. We're going to try and understand where that opinion came from. Was it fear? Did they come at you from a place of fear? Did they feel out of control and so they tried to assert control? This is what we're talking about. Understand the person's motives for what they did. Try to ease up on them in spite of what they did to you. And also in this step, you cut out the stuff about your story, which may not be an actual part of the story. You know what I mean? It's the stuff that we add to the actual event so that we can allow ourselves to really connect with that victim mentality. I heard that in his book. I heard it with my eyes. And I stopped for a minute and I thought about it. And I'm going to ask you, do this on your own time. Think of something minute. Wow. Give me a moment, please. I have some frogs that need to have a conversation with me. Whew. So I thought about it. We really do, when we tell ourselves these stories of events, we find a way and say, they did blah, 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 and I was hurt because before this happened to me before, and I had this coming into it, and they knew. And so they knew that, and they did it to me. That's the part where you got to get rid of that part. That they knew so? No. So go back, evaluate, and stick to the facts and only the facts, right? So you're going to get rid of that. And I want to say something about that victim mentality. And again, I know this might not be well received, but I'm going there. We don't think we're victims when we look at some of the stuff that we're holding on to, right? We don't think that we're victims. We're not victims. It's just that other person did something really nasty and we want to hold them accountable for it, right? But, and I know this may be uncomfortable, but stay with me again. If you are making the judgment that someone did something nasty to you for which they should be held accountable, you are, like it or not, simultaneously saying, I am a victim of what they did. And I've got someone up front who knows a great deal about these things, and she is nodding emphatically. Okay, so you got my back. Thank you. So again, whether we have recognized it or not in the past, we need to take some quiet time, perhaps while we're writing our letters, to reflect on the situation and identify how we've defined our victimhood in each narrative. If we're holding on to a burden of unforgiveness, we are also holding on to the image of ourselves as a victim. And those are tough words to hear, and they're tougher words to accept, but their toughness doesn't change the fact that they're true. Moving on to stage 4. Stage 4 is usually the place that I come at things from when I'm up here, okay? And stage 4, we must be open to the idea that there's divine purpose in everything, and that because of that simple fact, there is nothing to forgive. Okay? Stage 5 is to reframe your story. Replace the victim story with a new one, hopefully one of gratitude. In The Science of Mind on page 290 is one of my favorite lines, and it's one that I go to really often. I find that it applies in so many circumstances, and I can just hand it out like this sweet little treat when people need it. It is, there is one supreme intelligence which governs, guides, and guards, tells me what to do, when to act, and how to act. And this echoes a statement from the very first book in the Old Testament. That's Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. But as for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it for good, to do as he has done this day, to save many lives. So show of hands, who here believes that everything happens for a reason? Yeah, pretty much everyone, right? In the book study group, the Science of Mind book study group, this is an idea that we've pulled apart and chewed on quite a bit. Because if we believe that everything we do, how we do it, and when we do it is guided by God, if we truly believe that whatever happens is for a reason, we must then concede that the same is true for everyone else. And that's a lot, because that means two very important things. First, it means that those who hurt us were being guided by God. That supreme intelligence guided them to do what they did, say what they said, guided their moves, and we've been blaming them all the time, but they did exactly what they were supposed to do. And second, it means, stay with me, I know, I'm getting there. People are going, I'm not comfortable with what you're saying. You're not meant to be. Just be present. Okay? Understand, secondly, that we too have been guided by God. That spirit of love, which always works to bring us toward greater good, compelled and or impelled us. And what do I mean? Well, to impel something is to cause physical movement, physical motion, right? To compel is to provide strong motivation for someone to act or behave in a certain way. So everyone is physically moved to where they're meant to be, regardless of how we may try to fight it, and boy do we, and everyone is urged and motivated to behave or act the way they're meant to in every situation. So all the stuff you've been kicking yourself about, all the stuff that you've been hating about the things you've done in your past, like it or not, God was behind it. Sure, we have our own will, because I know that is what I'm hearing in the voices in your heads. What about free will? Hold up. We can make choices within the framework of events and circumstances, but then when push comes to shove, God is behind it. But how can that be? Right? The thing that happened was horrible. Consider the many different opportunities and choices we make in a single day. Any number of seemingly innocuous, trivial questions we answer and chances we take throughout every day. And quite often, there are choices we make which could lead to a larger impact down the road. Okay, taking the easy path towards something when we know the more challenging way is the one we're supposed to follow, cutting corners, avoiding things altogether simply because we don't feel like it. All those little choices that we make to turn away from challenge when it presents itself, they add up, right? And when enough of those have added up, and enough of those choices have been placed in our path, and we've made enough of the choices to say, nope, what happens? Spirit has no other choice than to whack us over the head and put us exactly where we're meant to be, right? We say, here, this is where you're supposed to go. I told you how to get there. Now we're going to do it the hard way. Remember that inspirational reading? God, as a parent disciplines their child, so does God discipline you. Discipline has gotten a bad rap because people think discipline and punishment are synonyms, and they are not. God will teach you and guide you like a parent. Not all parents think discipline is punishment. I certainly don't. So you are being guided. Sometimes guidance hurts. Okay? So, okay. We have to accept these things, right? But am I saying that you have no personal responsibility to others now as a result of this? Because that really is a big question, right? If God is saying this, then I have no personal responsibility. God made me do that. Do you see what happens when I'm writing these things? I'm trying to get ahead of your questions. It's here. No, I am not saying that you have no personal responsibility, because when we feel responsible, when we feel compelled to fix the damage, that is yet another learning moment for us. That feeling of responsibility is a gentle urging to learn the lesson, whatever it is. And when we ignore that gentle urging, we find that we say and do things which put us in brand new situations, which make us feel compelled to make amends. And when we ignore those other gentle urgings, and we do it for long enough, we inexplicably find ourselves learning the lesson the hard way, being forced to take responsibility. And big, often scary things happen. Things which may compel us to hold on to trauma. And as the shampoo bottle says, rinse and repeat. You know, it keeps going until we get it, right? Now, I struggled with whether or not to share this story with you. And I've only told it to a handful of people since it happened. And it's not because I'm holding on to it. Honestly, it's because I don't think about it. I just don't. But I'm going to tell you one of the lessons I learned. And the lessons that someone else hopefully learned as a result of their part in the whole thing. And maybe some of it will resonate with some of you. And maybe it won't, but you'll have a chewy bit of insight into my life. And that's always fun, right? You'll see that I didn't gain my perspective and my optimism and my trust the easy way. From the outside looking in, one might think that I've lived a charmed life. And in a manner of speaking, I did. I certainly haven't had it hard when you consider the stories of other struggles, but it hasn't always been a cakewalk. This happened one Friday night, my junior year of high school. My parents had gone on some kind of vacation, and they let me stay with a girl that lived a few houses down the street. And I went to a Royal High School in El Monte. I was a local girl. And back then, you could go off campus for lunch if you were in 11th or 12th grade and your parents had signed a little pass thing. So that day, my friend Dan drove a few of us to some fast food place or other. I mean, wherever you could get something cheap and quick. But later that afternoon, I realized that I left my purse in Dan's car. The girl I was staying with and a few of our other friends, they wanted to go to the football game that night, and my student ID card, which gets me into the game, was in his car. And none of us had a phone number for Dan. So I knew more or less where he lived. Like, I knew within probably a quarter of a block, half a block. And I knew definitely that he had a bright green hatchback. It was like a little, remember old Civics from the 80s? It was the green of your sweater there. Yeah. So I knew that car would find me. If I just went to that street, I would see the car and I would know which door to knock on. So I set off and I walked over to find him. And when I got to where his house should have been, the little green hatchback was not there. So I kept walking kind of up and down the street. And the tail end of that street used to end with horse properties on one side of the street, on the south side of the street. And the north side was kind of a vacant lot behind some industrial properties. So there was a whole lot of space between the houses there. So I think on that whole block, there were maybe 2 or 3 houses. And as I'm walking around there, this friendly guy acknowledges me, and I ask him if he knows Dan. And he said, no, he doesn't. But instead of letting me walk on alone, he starts walking alongside me. And he's going on and on about, oh, where do you go to school? Arroyo. Oh, I went to Arroyo. Do you know Mr. So-and-so? And like he's naming names. I didn't really care about this stuff, but I was polite because, I was raised to be polite. And then out of nowhere, he attacked me. And I will not go into detail, but it wasn't good. And I will say that it ended with him in rough shape. I remember being on the ground, in the dirt, under a tree, and fighting. And I fought hard. And I remember that I turned my head and I saw my keychain was in reach. And my keychain had a self-defense keychain called a Kubaton on it. And I could reach it. And I grabbed the Kubaton and I bit him in his face and I jammed the business end of the Kubaton in his eye. And I ran like I never had before and have not since. And when I got back to my friend's house, I didn't say anything. And I remember really vividly having tree sap stuck to the skin of my legs and arms, and clumps of it holding leaves in my hair. And I remember pulling leaves out of my clothes that night, and I didn't say anything, but not for the reason you might think. I think I was just processing it. When my parents got home, I think they got home the next day or 2 days later, my mom saw the bruises and I tried to hide them. And long story short, we visited doctors and police and they never found him. They called me out on a couple of pickups. It wasn't him. And I learned a lot from that experience. I learned that I can fight. I learned that nobody can make me do anything I don't want to. That not only can I fight, but I can win. I knew that he walked away from that experience hurt way more than me. And I know that he likely remembers it every time he looks in the mirror. Before the experience, I felt like I existed at the mercy of others. And that I had to keep my head down and not stand out if I didn't want people with bullish personalities to notice me. I thought I had to do whatever I was told, whatever I had to do to fit in order to avoid becoming a target. But after this happened, and I know how strange it sounds, but after this happened, I walked proudly because I won. The biggest bully I'd ever met out of the many, many I'd grown up with, the biggest one I'd ever met saw me as a target and attacked me, and I won. Yes, I avoided the area altogether for a very long time. I don't know if I've ever been back down that street, but I don't have a reason to, so it's vacant. I don't know, maybe it isn't now. Anyhow, digression. Yes, I avoided walking alone in that area for several years, but I came away stronger than I was. Yeah, I was attacked. Yes, someone victimized me, but I was not his victim. Not at all. Did God try to gently teach me that I was strong? Yeah. A lot of times, for many, many years up until that point. Absolutely. All those bullyish people throughout all my years of school up until that point. 12 years, because we got to count kindergarten in there. Maybe preschool, although I don't remember preschool bullies. Is that a thing? But yeah, from kindergarten through 11th grade, I had years of opportunities to learn to stand up and step into my strength and power. All of those people that I avoided and hid from for all those years, I can honestly say that God tried really, really hard to teach me that I had power. And then just before I reached the age where I'd have to start to navigate the world as a bona fide grown-up, something I probably also would have tried to hide from, God showed me that all by myself, without anyone's help, I have the strength to beat anything that comes my way. And I'm grateful for learning that lesson, even though it was a difficult one for me to grasp. And that man learned that he is not, in fact, invincible, that he cannot take whatever he wants at the expense of anyone. He learned that the power and strength he clearly thought he had were illusions. He learned that he can't control anything that doesn't want controlling. And he learned that often when you attack others, the person you're really hurting is yourself. There's all kinds of choices. We consistently take the easy way, even when we know the tough way is better for us. And we keep doing that until the universe has no other choice than to force us onto the hard road so we can learn whatever we're supposed to, and we feel hurt. It happens over and over to everyone, without exception. I'm not trivializing your pain. I am not negating the lasting impact something has had within your life. I'm not even saying that you shouldn't feel the way that you do. I'm simply asking you to take a step back and see that there is a pattern in how everything unfolds. And that pattern repeats and repeats for every one of us. And you may want to write that down. If you have that handy, that roadmap explaining that pattern everyone's life follows, and you keep it where you can see it, maybe even memorize it or meditate on it, you can begin to choose the slightly tougher path to the lessons when the opportunity is laid before you. Don't force the hand of God to manually correct your navigation in a big way. You can begin to get ahead of the problem before there's a problem. Will knowing this solve all of your problems and prevent you from ever having to experience pain in your life again? No, of course not. The truth is, some lessons can only be learned in a very difficult, potentially very painful way. Lessons like grief and loss. But when those big, difficult lessons come, it may help us see why. It may help us to realize, yeah, this one can only be learned by walking through fire. And it will help us make peace with the present, no matter whether the present feels like a lighthearted vacation or a steep, daunting uphill climb. Let it go. Get it out. Take your lesson and step into a stronger you. You deserve it. Everything that's happened is for you. Thank you.